Tariq, welcome once again. It was nice to see you again in Croatia after your summer spent in this. So we're here finally with your Obama book. I'm going to start with the cover because we have just half an hour. So why is Obama peeling off to be a Bush, whose idea was, we know the context of the book, but the cover also represents it?
The cover of the paperback edition shows Obama slowly turning into Bush. And the reason for that is that in concrete terms, Obama's politics at home and abroad on 9 out of 10 issues have been the same as Bush. And Bush acknowledges this. When Bush was asked last year, what do you think of Obama as your successor, he said he is an excellent president, I agree with him, he is doing what we did. So, in the United States, many people now, it's not even when I first said it, people were surprised, now people accept it. That the differences between Obama and Bush are not so great. American politics is no different from European politics. Center-left, center-right, they look different, they dress different, but they do the same things.
At the same time as you published your Obama book, another person did the same. It was Bob Woodward, and the book that he wrote was named Obama's Voice. I didn't know that someone already tried to compare them, but it's not so, they're not so comparable. And it was Stryker Maguire, I think, from the LSE, the Guardian article. And he's saying that you're pumping perfectly good points beyond recognition. It's kind of your style. Why do you do that?
Well, I think Stryker Maguire, who wrote that review, is a former Newsweek correspondent, a supporter of Obama, and many people do not like being told the truth in straightforward language. They want you to coat the truth in sugar, like put some icing on a poisonous cake. And I don't like doing that. If the cake is poisonous, better people recognize it from the beginning. I've always been like that. I'm not going to change now. It's best to be sharp and tell people the truth and not go into pieties that, yes, Obama meant well. I don't believe it. Obama said he was going to make wars in Afghanistan, he was going to send more troops, that Bush hadn't fought the Afghanistan war well, that he was going to violate Pakistan's sovereignty, and he did it. Not a big surprise. The surprise comes for those people who had illusions about Obama. And to them I can say, I'm sorry, but all that has been portrayed is your illusions. Nothing else.
You wrote it when Obama was half of his term.
It was already obvious, Ivana, that Obama in the first 6 months was not going to do anything different. He had a majority in the House of Representatives. He had a majority in the Senate. It wasn't the Republicans, it was a Democrat majority. He could have done what he wanted to do, and he didn't. And the reason is, no one was stopping him. And his apologists say, he wants to do good things, but the Republicans don't let him. But for the first year and a half, he had everyone would have gone along with him because he was such a popular elected president. Now his ratings are going right down,
And we're in the election year.
Yeah.
So,
he
will win again.
I think so, because the Republicans haven't been able to come up with a convincing candidate. Mitt Romney, who is the Republican candidate, is not a very sharp guy. He's a bit slow-witted. He's a Mormon, which is a sort of strange, crazy, cultish religion with very strange beliefs. And so I don't think he is going to be elected, but you never know, because if the economic situation suddenly gets much worse, then people will say, okay, anyone but Obama because he hasn't done anything. But my feeling is Obama will be elected, yeah.
A lot of things happened after you finished your book.
Mm-hmm.
The latest thing was the gay marriage support that you gave a few days ago. But maybe we can start with a thing we discussed last year concerning Arab Spring, but past periods concerning the Occupy movement.
Well, the Occupy movement was exactly an opposition to Obama. Young people who had many illusions in it. I was in the United States during election year, and I saw how young people mobilized for Obama. And many of the people who came out into the occupations of public spaces all over the United States, many of them had campaigned and voted for Obama. So the occupation movement is a signal to Obama saying you have lost a layer of young people who supported you because they're very disappointed with you. So that, I think, is the significance of the occupation movement. It's not that they have come up with new alternative. It's just a sign we are angry, we are protesting, we don't like the system, we don't like its lies, we don't like the way it functions. Help us. No one is there to help them. And no one will help you unless you help yourselves. So that is what is going on in the United States. It's very interesting. Also, the occupation movement in the United States is different. It's not the same in each city. In some places, it has a much more solid base. In other places, it's essentially ephemeral, very dependent on the media for publicity and support. So it varies, but what it does show is a growing anger against the system, but as yet no real way in which to challenge or confront that system except to say we are angry.
You're going to talk a lot about the crisis of Europe, but your perception of crisis of America, and I don't mean it just in economic terms, but we had in a way of politics, we had the first as a reflection Tea Party, also anti-immigration politics, all the things that, they're common globally, but they're specific for America. How do you think it will evolve?
The Tea Party, again, was a strange, right populist response to the crisis. There were three different currents in the Tea Party. There were the libertarians, led by Ron Paul and his son, who are against any state intervention at all, either in the economy or anywhere else. They attack the Federal Reserve as an agent of the devil, that it's undemocratic, etc., etc. At the same time, they're against the wars that America is fighting abroad, saying these wars are unnecessary, we don't want them, and America should settle as a country within its own borders, defend itself, but not go out and save money as a result. These wars are not our wars. So it's a strange mix. Then you have a current in the Tea Party, which, by the way, now is very weak. It's virtually disappeared. It's been more or less amalgamated into the Republican Party quite efficiently. There's another current which is a straightforward racist current, which says this is a white country and we don't like having a colored president. So that's straightforward. We know this feeling historically in the United States for a long time. And one should never forget that the largest political movement in the history of the United States was the Ku Klux Klan. It was the largest movement. No movement of the left or the traditional conservative or the center has ever succeeded in building a movement as large as the Ku Klux Klan. So movements like this leave roots, they don't totally disappear. And there was one faction in the Tea Party which was like that. Then there was a third faction which was just angry at the bailouts, not for philosophical reasons, but it was angry with the bailouts that had been given to the big banks. And they said, why is this money being given to the rich? So it was a combination of these three things, but it lasted very long, and even within, very shortly, and even within a year, 80% of the original members of the Tea Party had left the Tea Party. So it became a vehicle for Sarah Palin to try and see if she could become president. But the Republican Party leadership soon put an end to that. I think they had too much dirt on her and they blackmailed her behind the scenes, saying if you go for it, we're going to come out and reveal your story. So that ended her. So it's not a very significant movement, except in terms of dragging the Republican Party very, very sharply on some issues to the right.
Okay, we didn't talk much about involvement of things, but anyway, talking about Obama's wars, how do you see the role that his administration played in Libya and in Syria? Syria.
That's your reply.
Yes. It peeps on Syria, I don't know why. Libya is kind of finished.
Libya is finished, it's been a disaster, it's left a country completely wrecked. There is no stability at all. The entire social infrastructure of that country is collapsed. Different gangs, tribal gangs, are fighting for supremacy in the country, and it's in a total state of chaos, which is why you don't see too many reports about it, because there's nothing good. Even the people who supported the war, there's nothing good they can say about it, so it's not reported. Syria, it's an open question. The Americans are reluctant to go in partially because they've seen the results in Libya, and partially because they are nervous at what will happen if they allow democratic elections in Syria, if you have another conservative Islamist type party coming to the top. It's not that they can't control these parties, but they have to just spend more time and energy and money trying to get these people under control, as they're trying to do in Egypt today. So, and the signs are that they have decided so far against NATO bombing of Syria or defending Syrian airspace, etc., etc. They are very concentrated at the moment on Iran and what to do about Iran because of the Israeli pressure on them. The Israelis want this Iranian regime destroyed. And even here the Americans, especially the American military, is not keen on this because they feel it will overstretch them a great deal. So I think the Americans, as far as the Middle East is concerned, are sticking to that part of the Middle East that they know and making sure nothing happens. Bahrain, where there was a huge uprising, which was crushed on American orders by the Saudi Arabians. And just yesterday, the Americans resumed military aid to this unrepresentative regime in Bahrain. Saudi Arabia, they protect. They protect like nothing else, because that is now their oldest ally in the Middle East. And the fact that this is a corrupt, ruthless monarchy, unrepresentative, one of the more vicious regimes in the world, doesn't bother them or their allies. The European Union, which just follows the Americans blindly on most issues, doesn't open its mouth on Saudi Arabia. Why? If we are talking about democracy, if we are talking about human rights, I mean, I know it's all a joke, they don't seriously believe it, they're used as weapons, but then if you're using that, why not use it against the Saudi Arabians, which is the most undemocratic regime in the Middle East? It was worse than Mubarak. Much, much worse than Saddam Hussein, much worse than Gaddafi. What do you do about it? You keep it going, you back it. And in return, you have total control of Saudi oil. And in return, much of the money got from Saudi oil actually comes back into the West. Saudi Arabia is a country with a very tiny air force and army, but they spend billions on buying armaments from the United States. And you have to think about these things. This is how the world functions. The ideas that people come up with in order to justify it are essentially not taken seriously in most parts of the world. And now increasingly, in Europe too, but I won't come into that because Professor Zizek and I are discussing that this evening.
So this is kind of a blitzkrieg because we have to look at the time. You've mentioned Saudi Arabia. I have to turn to another key country, as they like to be called, which is your home country, Pakistan. So when you look Obama's, how to call them, plays around the region, what did he do exactly in Pakistan concerning, all the not just the war, but the situation in Balochistan, drugs, connection with Iran, all this thing.
The United States has no real plans regarding Pakistan. This is a country they have controlled since 1950 in different ways. They abandoned it for some time, but they use it. And so they have no real plans except to keep it under their control. They are worried about the Pakistani military because within this military there is a faction which is very hostile to the United States. But the political elite in Pakistan is totally with the United States, or most of them. And we have today a strange combination. A military which is supposed to be an ally of the United States but is not a total ally. A political elite which is totally dependent on the United States and does whatever the Americans ask it to. So we have a president in Pakistan who is probably the most, or one of the most corrupt heads of state in the world. I think if you would compare him to some of the leaders you have in this part, he would beat you. I'm not joking. Even Montenegro seems very good compared to our president in Pakistan. So, and this guy makes money, loots the state, has a hand in every single business deal that goes forward, and the whole country knows and hates it. And the only reason he is in power is because his wife was assassinated. Some people think by him. I don't, but many people in Pakistan think he assassinated his wife in order to come to power. So that's the political leadership of this country. And the military leadership is torn. On the one hand, it's very dependent on American weapons. On the other hand, it has a stake in Afghanistan. It knows the Americans can't stay there forever, and they are waiting for the Americans to go when they will establish some control or some big influence in Afghanistan again. Which is why, for 10 years, Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man in the world, was staying in a safe house in Pakistan, just close to our military academy. Now, did the Americans not know? They say they didn't know. Did the Pakistani military not know? It's impossible. Of course they knew. Of course they knew. So that it's a very contradictory issue. Meanwhile, the country goes from one disaster to the other. 60% of the population, children, 60% of the children born in Pakistan are born moderately or severely stunted. So the height of the average Pakistani is going down, not going up. That's the situation. It's very grim. And we have an uncaring elite which doesn't care about the people. And the country has a population of 200 million and it has nuclear weapons. It symbolizes this globalized world in which we live better than many other countries, where the rich rule ruthlessly and just don't care about the poor.
Talking about the poor, Obama is the first black president, but he just, went once to Africa, and we know that Africa is kind of becoming a new battleground of all the players, that they'd like to say. So how do you see his involvement and all this, big game being played again, but now with different players like China and India?
Yeah. Well, Ivana, let's be accurate here. He's the first mixed-race president. This is not unimportant in the United States. African Americans notice all these things, but still, it's true, he's not white. He's the first non-white person to enter the White House. And symbolically, his wife is African American, and the children very much see themselves like that. So, as a symbolic thing, it was good that this taboo had been broken. But then after a few months of this, people said, so what? And they were right, because you can't judge a person by the color of their skin or their gender all the time. You judge them on the basis of their politics and what they do. And let's say we had a married gay couple in the White House. Well, it would be the first time. But we wouldn't judge them by the fact that they're gay or that they're married. We would judge them on the basis of what they did. Identity politics is interesting to a certain extent, but beyond that, it can't be the criteria for determining anything, really. Especially if you're in power, then you're judged on the basis of that. Already people have more or less forgotten, except the racists, because Obama, there was a big article by Peter Bergen, a great anti-terrorist expert in the New York Times a few weeks ago, where he said, our warrior president. That's the way they define him, as a president who's not scared to make wars. And they accused, one of the things they're saying in the advertising campaign which accompanies American elections, that Mitt Romney wouldn't have had the courage to order American SEALs to go and kill Osama bin Laden. And Romney said, this is just a joke, even Carter would have done that, we would all have done that, why are they raising this issue? None of them, of course, raised the issue. What is happening in the world? If the president of the world's largest state can order a group of people to go into someone else's country and kill someone without any attempt to capture and to bring him or her to trial, the law doesn't matter. And since the killing of bin Laden, Obama has passed a law which gives the American president the right to order the execution of any American citizen without a trial or recourse to law. Any American citizen. And this is meant to be the model for who? For terrorists? Because that's what they do. They go and kill people. So when you begin to mimic the Western leaders, not a single European leader attacked Obama for that. That's the world we live in. So it's not a good story, what is going on in the United States today.
You mentioned Bin Laden, return to Africa then after this, but you mentioned the killing of Bin Laden. What do you think to another one which was broadcasted, and it was the lynch of Muammar al-Gaddafi?
It was disgraceful. They should, if they wanted to, not that I have great beliefs in the tribunal at The Hague, which is a victors' tribunal. They only try people who they don't like. If you had a real court for war crimes, international war crimes, real war crimes, Bush and Blair would be tried for war crimes against the people of Iraq. They killed 1 million Iraqis. 1 million Iraqis died after the occupation. Why no trials? Because they think they won. Whereas from the Balkans, they pick up these politicians and take them there to show we believe in justice. Well, I don't believe that. I believe all these war crimes tribunals are essentially tribunals to try people who they have defeated. And the disgusting way in which Gaddafi was killed is really bad. What does it encourage? You hand him to a lynch mob. They did the same with Saddam Hussein. He was virtually lynched. It had the trappings of a trial. But it was a lynching which took place. In the case of bin Laden, it was clear. And you had all these images which you saw. Obama, Hillary Clinton next to him looking tense. Will our wonderful boys succeed or not, like a Hollywood movie? And then they find bin Laden and they kill him. And young school kids supposed to be educated run out onto the streets or in their college campuses and shout, we got him. What a big surprise. You're the most powerful country in the world. And you've got one guy, aging guy, sitting in a disused house in Pakistan watching videos. You've killed him, great. So what? So what? And you're celebrating this as a big victory and you lost all sense of proportion? And why didn't you try him? Why didn't you bring him before a court and try him for his crimes? To educate the population all over the world. They didn't do that. They could have. So this is not a good example for anywhere in the world, because when the world's largest power behaves like this, then other people in the world say we can do it as well. Who are you to tell us not to behave like this? That's the problem we now confront. And on civil rights, Obama has gone way beyond Bush. He promised he would end the Guantanamo prison. It's open. In fact, and this is quite shocking, Bush released more prisoners from Guantanamo than Obama has done. That's just a fact. And many people are kept in Guantanamo who were picked up from all over the place and taken there. Most of them probably innocent. We don't know because they haven't had proper trials. This is what goes on.
You've discussed last year about the Arab Spring. How do you see it the year after?
The Arab Spring is a very uneven process. Important things have happened, obviously. 2 dictators were toppled. The West tried to save them, but they couldn't do it. What has happened after that is democracy. Most of the time, in Tunisia and in Egypt, the left, as we know it, or progressive people, didn't exist. The people who were usually fighting against the regime for something or the other were Islamists of one sort or the other. They were punished, they were put into prison, they were tortured, they were killed. People know that. So when the time comes, they vote for them. And I'm not opposed to it. If that's who people want to vote for, they vote for. People learn not through books, but through their own experiences. So they will learn and move on, we hope, provided there are alternatives. But for me, the most important lesson of the Arab Spring is that large numbers of people decided to take their future in their own hands. They didn't depend on politicians. They didn't depend on the elite. They essentially said, we have had enough and we are going to get rid of these people. And they lost their fear of death. And losing your fear of death when you're part of a mass movement is the beginning of the end for a regime, usually. If you carry on, few regimes can survive because sooner or later the military splits. And in order to prevent the militaries from splitting, Mubarak was sacrificed, because that the United States couldn't tolerate was any divisions between the base of the military and its high command. And that was very interesting in Alexandria, in Suez, in Cairo itself, the fraternization between ordinary soldiers and the people. Very, very important. And that was something which people will never forget. And if people feel we have done it once, they can do it again. And for me, that's the most important thing which has come out of the Arab Spring, is a revival of the masses, of mass anger, of the capacity of the masses to emancipate themselves. And if that were to spread to Europe, then we would have very interesting developments here. We see it a bit.
African Spring. Is it African Spring? Is it possible? Because someone said last year that the process won't be finished, until the rest of the continent goes through that direction. We've seen what happened in some countries. We're seeing what's happening in Mali, which is going to the other direction.
But you see, the Mali business is not unrelated to the war in Libya.
Yes, of course. All the other things.
Exactly. That when the Africans were expelled from Libya by the NATO government or the pro-NATO government, What happened? They went crazy, they were angry, they were mistreated, the Tuaregs, the leaders had been kicked out of Libya, and they went and tried to take something else to survive and to live. This is what happens. We don't live in a world where you can just work in isolation in one country. Everything has an impact on everything else, especially in the African continent. And Gaddafi on this question was good. He was very hostile to any anti-African race, black racism, which is common among some of the Arab regimes in the Maghreb. He said, no, we break from it. I prefer to be an African leader than an Arab leader. He was a bit crazy on many things, but on this question he was good. And so the result of that has not been a good one. And unfortunately, in Africa, as yet, we have not seen a mass movement. We've seen the breakup of countries. We've seen the the United States operation using the Ethiopians against their neighbors with dreadful results. You know, people talk about the pirates. Where are the pirates coming from? The Somalian pirates who have become a new icon. They're coming from a country which is a disaster story because of everything that has been done to it over the last 10 years. And so they do, instead of becoming immigrants trying to come to some European country, they have their own ships and they take Europe's ships. The Europeans should be happy with that, actually, because they hate immigrants. So it's better that these pirates actually take European ships and can come to Europe. They should do some deal with them. Say, okay, you can take 5 ships a year, but no more.
And just for the end, we have, I think, 2 minutes, and I hope that we will not that long. The quote that you had from Malcolm X, which is the beginning of your book. It isn't the president who can help or hurt, it's the system. And the system is not only ruling us in America, it is ruling the world. So talking about the rulers of the world of today, I think, new forums is G20. How do you think that, America weakened or rising again in these terms? They're using it in a system, will behave in the new chess game.
Well, I think Malcolm X was right in what he said in 1964, that it's a systemic problem. It's not a question of individuals, good individuals or bad individuals. And any president of the United States defends that system. The system is not as strong as it was, but it is still very strong. And there is no alternative in the minds of Europe or a lot of Asian countries. They accept American hegemony. There is no desire to challenge it. Not even the Chinese, who some people have hopes that they don't challenge American hegemony. We don't know what Chinese foreign policy is. It is very narrowly defined in their interests, largely in that region. They want, all these countries want a large dominant military power, which is the United States, to make sure that the capitalist system doesn't go under. And the United States does it and will carry on doing it unless things happen that we can't see at the moment. But certainly the dream of the founders of the European Union, Monnet, and Schuman and others, which was to create a Europe which was neutral between the United States and the Soviet bloc. But the Soviet bloc collapsed, and that collapse of the Soviet bloc made America an all-powerful, unilateral imperial power. And so those early dreams of the founders of Europe collapsed with the Soviet Union. That is the situation we are in at the moment. And I can't see a way out of it right now. Maybe those of you who survived to the end of the century will have a better idea. But at the moment, that is the situation, and it's foolish to pretend that the American empire is finished or that they are about to collapse. They are weak and their economy is weak, but militarily they're extremely strong. And they will make sure that they remain strong by making sure that no rivals arise. And that is an important thing to understand. And be careful about this, because if you think the American empire has collapsed and finished, then obviously all we have to do is just wait. It'll go under. And you don't have to do anything politically to agitate against it or to fight against it, and that's a dangerous thing.
Tariq, thank you very much.